So when the Palestinians and the Muslims would stop the car and see that this family is a Christian family, they would get them out of the car and shoot them in cold blood. It was called identity killing at the time. We stopped traveling. That's why we became prisoners. By 1975, the Palestinians and the Muslims formed an army called Jaysh Lebanon al-Arabi, the Arabic Lebanese army, and started taking over the military bases and destroying the Lebanese infrastructure and attacking the Lebanese government institutions. The army base above my house in South Lebanon was the last army base left in the country, in the hands of the Lebanese army. This was in 1975. They grouped their people together, and in trying to take over the military base in my town, they bombed my home, bringing it down and burying me under the rubble. This was in 1975. I was wounded. I ended up in a hospital for 2.5 months and undergone surgeries. And I would ask my parents, why did they do this to us? And my father would tell me, because we are Christians. The Muslims consider us infidels. So I learned at a very young age, at age 10 years old, that I am wanted dead simply because I was born into the Christian faith. I left the hospital and I came home, and my home was no longer the home I left. I ended up living in a bomb shelter, underground, with no electricity, no water, and very little food. To get some water, we would crawl to a nearby spring under snipers' bullets, my mother and I, in a ditch, and we would get to the spring, and my mother had to use the stocking on top of the bottle of water to catch all the worms and all the rocks and all the maggots so we can drink the water. And then we would crawl back to the bomb shelter. Before we left, every time we would say our last goodbyes, because we did not know if we're going to come back alive or dead. We didn't have any food. My mother finally crawled up to our storage place and brought down dried rice and dried lentils and dried chickpeas. And she would soak them overnight so we can eat. And this was the food we lived on. The only greenery we had to eat was the grass that grew around our bomb shelter. I would crawl out under the bombs and I would dig grass out. And I learned how to peel the thorn so I can eat the stalk with my ripe hands of 12 years old, so I can eat the green stalk inside the thorn. That was the only greenery we ate. We had no heat. We would freeze. We are in the mountains. We are next to the border of Israel. My father had to break twigs from trees and pour kerosene and benzene on them in the middle of our bomb shelter, our 8 by 10 room where we lived underground. And many times we would cuddle around the fire, and many times we would fall asleep, and we had an agreement. Whoever woke up first would drag the other two outside and slap them on their face to wake up because of carbon monoxide poisoning. We would pass out. This was my life. Meanwhile, we were surrounded by the Palestinians and the Muslims who want to slaughter us. And we knew what our fate was going to be, because we knew what they were doing to the Christian towns in Lebanon as they overtaken the country. People that have fled from the rest of Lebanon who came to our area would tell us what they were doing in the other parts of Lebanon. One of the famous massacres is the massacre of the Moor. They massacred many Christians. They would walk into a bomb shelter, meaning the Islamists and the Palestinians. They would find a family hiding in a bomb shelter. They would find a mother and a father with a little baby. They would take the baby, tie one leg of the baby to the mother and another leg to the father, and pull the parents apart, splitting the child in half. They would walk into our churches, urinate and defecate on the altar, using the Bibles as toilet paper. The last lady that worked for me was completely mentally disturbed. I hired her so I can take care of her and her family. They tied her to a chair. They tied her 16-year-old son on her lap, held a knife to her hand, and made her behead him before they raped her 2 daughters in front of her. I think the biggest disservice the American media did to the American public is not show them the beheading of Daniel Pearl and Nick Berg. I think we in America, as a civilization, need to understand the barbaric nature of the enemy we are facing that's heading our way. Few people from my town, knowing what our fate was going to be, went to Israel, who was supposedly the enemy at the time. Israel was supposedly Lebanon's enemy, according to the government-controlled media. But we as Christians, our back was to the Jews, Israel. Our front was to the Palestinians and the Muslims. And we knew of the 2 evils, of the 2 devils, the Jews are not going to slaughter us, because we had more shared values with them than we had with the radical Islamists and the Palestinians. Few people from my town went to Israel and begged for help. And Israel started coming in the middle of the night from 1976 till 1978, bringing food for the children, bringing bomb shelters to the people who didn't have a bomb shelter, bringing blankets to the family, bringing medication, bringing food for the military, bringing ammunition to the Christians, and teaching them how to fight, taking them into Israel to be trained. Because the Christian Lebanese had college degrees, had education. They were not street gangs. And you can have all the college degrees on your wall behind you, your doctorates, your law degree, and everything else. It doesn't do you squat when you are faced with an enemy who believes that beheading you is an order from Allah. And this is how we stayed alive for another 2 years, until 1978. One day, one of our militia members, the Christian militia in the south, came to us and he said, I just want to let you know that tonight we're going to be attacked. And we may die because we had lost so many people and I don't think we can fight. And I just want to wish you a merciful death. And I remember dressing in my burial clothes at age 13 because I did not want to look ugly when I'm dead because I wanted to look pretty. And I remember putting on my Easter dress that my mother had made for me. And we had a 2-hour ceasefire. And my mother was combing my long hair and tying a white ribbon in it that matched the white flowers in my dress. And I stood there looking at the little mirror in the bomb shelter crying, begging her, I don't want to die. I'm only 13 years old. The only reason I didn't die that night is because that night is when Israel came in physically into Lebanon and pushed the Palestinians and the Muslims away from our area. That was Operation Litani. We've been hearing a lot about the Litani for the last month or 2 months because of what's been happening with Hezbollah. And Israel set up checkpoints around our areas. And this is what kept us alive for another 4 years, until Israel invaded Lebanon all the way to Beirut in 1982. And the reason why Israel entered Lebanon in 1982, because Israel was working with the Christians in Lebanon to liberate Lebanon from the radical Islamic element supported by Syria, protected by Iran, financed by the petrodollars pouring from all around the Arabic country to help Yasser Arafat create a base to terrorize Israel. They wanted to destroy the only Arabic democracy that existed in the Middle East. The Christian Lebanese were working with Israel. The Christian Lebanese from Beirut were being trained in Israel and in Tel Aviv, just as well as the Christians in South Lebanon. Israel came in, and the only reason Israel came in was because Syria, who was financing the radical Islamists and supporting them and protecting them and supplying them with weaponry, were shelling the northern towns of Israel to the point where the northern towns of Israel, their lives ceased to exist. They lived in bomb shelters just like us. And this didn't go on for a month or two. This went on for a year before Israel invaded Lebanon. And Israel entered all the way to Beirut to push the Syrian cannons and the artillery and the machine guns so their guns would not reach northern Israel. And they were working with the Christians hopefully to expel Yasser Arafat and the PLO out of Lebanon and control the radical element that had taken hold of the country. Nobody in the world understood what was happening because the Palestinian propaganda machine and the Muslim radical propaganda machine, which was well financed and oiled by petrodollars, was well at work while the West was asleep. During that time, my mother became wounded and we had to take her to an Israeli hospital for treatment because Israel was our only lifeline. She was wounded by an Islamic shell falling in front of our bomb shelter as the Muslims were retreating when Israel was advancing into Lebanon. And I'm going to tell you a little story that changed my outlook and changed my life. Before we left the bomb shelter to take my mother to the hospital, my father handed me $60. He said, here's $60 in case you needed it since you're going to be taking your mother to Israel. And I remember touching money for the first time in my life. Because when you live in a bomb shelter, you don't go shopping. And I took the money and we went up to the Lebanese hospital that Israel has fixed. Israel had fixed up a room, put an Israeli soldier on duty and 2 Israeli nurses to give my mother first aid. They gave her first aid, put her in an Israeli-donated ambulance, drove us to the border, which